Callum Windsor adjusted the knot of his tie with a slow, practiced motion, but his reflection in the mirror gave nothing back. The morning sun poured through the arched window behind him, illuminating the Montecito bedroom he once called a sanctuary. Liana had already left. She had risen before dawn, murmuring about a team call with the As Ever branding committee in Copenhagen, her voice calm but distant. She hadn't touched the breakfast tray he'd ordered. He noticed the corner of her scarf still draped over the chair and folded it carefully, as if preserving some trace of softness between them. Later that day, Callum stood in the estate's lower garden, watching the estate staff haul metal poles for what he assumed was another brand shoot. The security team he recognized Burke, Jonathan, Mason moved with disciplined precision, speaking quietly into their comms. Then a fourth man stepped out from the black vehicle that had been idling beyond the hedges. He was taller than the others, with close-cropped hair and a presence that caught Callum off guard. The stranger scanned the property, then reached into his coat and retrieved a folder, handing it to one of the aides with a mechanical nod. Callum narrowed his eyes. He had never seen this man before. No official notification had come through. His personal security briefings and none of his regular team had mentioned any changes. Something about the way the man moved silent, rehearsed, not deferential, set off a silent alarm inside him. By afternoon, the stranger was inside the main house. Callum walked briskly through the hallway and into the west corridor, where he found Liana surrounded by her logistics team. The air smelled of lily and tension. She caught sight of him as he approached, but didn't excuse herself from the conversation. He waited, then stepped in closer, placing a hand gently on the back of her chair. She didn't flinch, but she also didn't look up. Callum asked who the new hire was. Liana glanced toward the others, then dismissed them with a nod. When they were alone, she crossed her arms and said he had been brought on temporarily for the brand's safety during the launch tour, nothing more. Callum stood still. She turned away before he could speak again. That night, after the children had gone to bed, he sat at the far end of the couch, scrolling through the name Vaughn had texted him. Marcus Trell. One former affiliation popped up on the encrypted channel, something tied to a private diplomatic post in Riyadh, now defunct. No other details, just redactions. Trell's name was clean, too clean. Callum locked his phone and stared at the ceiling. He didn't speak to Liana the rest of the night. When she came in and slipped under the sheets, he remained awake, eyes open, heart clenched around something that had no name yet. The next morning, Callum rose before the sun. He moved through the hallway like a man preparing for a confrontation, each step slower than the last, each breath deeper. He had already made up his mind he would confront the issue directly. No more waiting, no more second-guessing. As he entered the kitchen, the scent of fresh bread mixed with the bitter aroma of dark roast coffee. Liana was not there. Instead, Marcus Trell stood near the window, speaking softly into an earpiece while reviewing notes on a black leather pad. Callum paused at the doorway. Trell didn't acknowledge him. Instead, the man turned slightly and walked past, his boots making a deliberate rhythm on the tiles. Callum followed him with narrowed eyes, then walked over to the counter and flipped open his laptop. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up the internal itinerary for the As Ever brand tour. His name was nowhere on it, not as a guest, not as a spouse, not even as a security liaison. Trell's name, however, appeared on every page: lead risk advisor, point of contact, emergency authority. He leaned back, stunned. She had built an entire security network around her movement, and not once had she consulted him. Not out of malice, he thought, but out of some growing autonomy that frightened him more than betrayal ever could. Later that afternoon, Callum waited for Liana outside her brand's operations tent. When she emerged, surrounded by assistants and coordinators, he walked up and placed his hand lightly on her arm. She looked at him, unreadable. He asked her, calmly, why she hadn't shared anything about Trell's role or the fact that his own team had been dismissed from the upcoming New York event. Liana tilted her head slightly, then said the decision had been made to streamline her travel and ensure separation between brand engagements and personal life. He frowned, then asked if she truly believed their children were outside of that equation. She did not respond. That evening, Callum reviewed Trell's movements through the estate via archived security footage. He watched the man pace outside Archie's playroom, brief a junior guard near the library, and enter the garage for nearly 10 minutes without logging the purpose. The following day, Callum brought the footage to Julian Kent, his longtime advisor. Julian watched in silence, then took a long breath and asked what Callum wanted to do next. Callum didn't answer right away. He stared at the frozen image of Trell on the screen, then finally said he wanted an unofficial profile built, one that would bypass standard clearance. Julian nodded, already dialing a contact. As the line rang, Callum stood, arms crossed, staring out the office window as the wind rustled through the hedges below. He realized then this wasn't about one man, it was about the slow unraveling of a bond built in quieter times, now strained by ambition and mistrust. That night, the silence in their bedroom grew heavier. She typed on her tablet until midnight. He read the same page of a book 6 times. Neither of them spoke. And though they lay side by side, they couldn't have felt farther apart. A week later, Callum boarded a private jet bound for San Diego, his face unreadable beneath dark sunglasses. He carried no press pass, no formal invitation, just a tailored suit, a slim black leather folder, and the quiet determination of a man who no longer trusted what was happening around his family. The As Ever Gala had been promoted for weeks, a glamorous showcase of ethical luxury, wellness visionaries, and elite brand partners. Liana would be the centerpiece, delivering a keynote to hundreds of industry leaders. Callum had once stood beside her at such events. Now he wasn't even listed on the guest registry. He stepped out into the California heat with Julian close behind him. Julian had managed to secure a contact inside the venue's logistics team. They walked past the line of arriving guests, slipped through the side service entrance, and made their way toward the internal security checkpoint. That's where everything changed. Marcus Trell stood directly ahead. Trell raised one hand, calm and expressionless, and signaled to the uniformed guard beside him. The guard glanced at a tablet, then looked at Callum. Trell spoke first. He told the guard that the guest had no clearance. Callum stepped forward and announced that he was not a guest, he was Liana's husband. Trell didn't react. Instead, he pointed toward the main road and told the guard to escort both men off the premises. Callum stood still for a moment. Then he reached into his folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a risk profile, the same one Julian's contact had assembled, detailed records of Trell's affiliations, private consultancy transactions, and encrypted communication with press liaisons abroad. He held it up, not to threaten, but to warn. Trell glanced at it for less than 2 seconds, then turned away without a word. Julian put a hand on Callum's shoulder and urged him to leave before cameras noticed. Callum hesitated, eyes fixed on the red carpet entrance just beyond the checkpoint. Through the trees and fabric banners, he caught a glimpse of Liana stepping onto the stage, bathed in soft white light, surrounded by applause. He didn't attend the gala. That night, back in his hotel suite, Callum sat at the edge of the bed and stared at his phone. He had sent the file to Liana's private email. No subject line. No explanation. Just one message. You've let him too close. The screen remained still. Outside. The city buzzed with the energy of champagne parties and magazine launches, but inside the quiet of that room, Callum's thoughts churned. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was weary. Something fragile had shifted between them, like the quiet crack of wood in a house no one realized was rotting. He hadn't come to expose anyone. He'd come to protect what was left of the life they had built, and now he wasn't sure how. Much of it remained. 6 weeks passed before Callum saw Liana again in a room that wasn't shared with staff, makeup artists, or press liaisons. The As Ever tour had ended in Tokyo, its final event splashed across magazine covers and wellness podcasts. Liana had returned glowing, the kind of glow that didn't come from peace but from momentum, the unstoppable forward pull of purpose. Callum watched her from the second floor of their Montecito home as she exited the car and handed her assistant a silver suitcase. She walked up the stone steps slowly, as if she knew the conversation waiting for her would be different than the last dot later that evening. After the children had gone to bed and the house had hushed into its usual nighttime rhythm, Callum sat in the dim glow of the library. The fireplace flickered low. Liana entered quietly, wearing a soft blue wrap and holding a glass of water. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she stood by the window, looking out into the garden, the same one where they used to host summer brunches, the same one where she had once whispered to him about leaving everything behind for a quieter life. Callum waited, then asked if she had read the report. She nodded. He asked why she hadn't responded. She replied that there was nothing to defend. Trell had been let go. That was all. He looked at her more closely then, at the stiffness in her posture, the way her hand tightened slightly around the glass. She wasn't cold, she was tired. Worn down not by scandal, but by the effort it took to keep separate worlds from colliding. He told her he had felt erased. Not by her success, but by her silence. She turned and finally met his eyes. Liana explained that the brand had become too big too fast. The demands had multiplied. Everyone needed her to be something, an icon, a strategist, a symbol. And somewhere in that noise, she had started filtering her choices through what would preserve the image, not what would protect the relationship. Trell, she admitted, had filled a space not just as a guard, but as a handler. Someone who didn't question. Someone who made hard decisions for her so she wouldn't have to. Callum stood and walked to the bookshelf, running a hand across the dusty covers. He asked her if she still knew how to be a wife when no one was watching. Liana walked to the armchair and sat down quietly. She didn't offer an answer. That night, they slept in the same bed but didn't reach for each other. The morning after, she left early again. He stayed behind. The staff resumed their quiet schedules. The house returned to order. But beneath it all, something had shifted permanently. There had been no explosion, no shouted accusations, no headlines about betrayal. Only a slow and silent drift like two boats that had once been lashed together, but had quietly come untied under the weight of the rising tide.